Morning. Audible? Fine. So I'll not be taking the full duration class today. So I'm not feeling that well. So we'll give you leave little early. Will that be fine for today? Okay. Chalo. So we needed to start with the background of the British East India Company. So now, so already we have completed the regional kingdom part and background of the British East India Company. And then after we need to go into the acts and the regulations which were there at this point of time. So how it all started. So very first thing that, just give me 1 minute. Features of the company, that basically important attributes of the company. So now, listen. So when it comes to British East India Company, first we need to understand the important decision makers in the company, and then after, in India, how the company operated. So British East India Company, the most important decision makers or the most important authority in the company were court of directors. पहले ध्यान से समझना, ठीक है? Were court of directors, and in fact today's class is not about history, it is more of a polity. It is a more of a constitutional background of the that Indian, or you can say that historical background of the Indian Constitution. So I think you have already started with your polity classes, and moreover, those parts would not be covered by, I think Jatin sir is taking the classes. So sir will not be covering, and in fact all the parts related to the historical background I would be covering in the classes. Okay? So now very first thing, that the most important authority in the company were 24 court of directors. You remember on the very first day we wrote that it was first venture capitalist organization or enterprise in the world, which means that there is an idea, and in that idea you people are investing or other people are investing. Then so somebody has come up with the idea, but then everyone else, good number of the people who have money, they have invested in the company. So it means that those people who have invested, they are shareholders of the company. Then so when it comes to who will appoint or who appointed this court of directors, so 24 court of directors were appointed by shareholders of the company, meaning that people who have invested money in the company. So they were appointed by the shareholders of the company, and moreover, the shareholders of the company were called as court of proprietors. So court of proprietors, it's an alternative name for them. Then moreover, how these court of directors, they functioned. So there were many committees of the court of directors, and in these committees were managing the affairs. Then so just like in the government also, many a times when the situation arises, so we create committees. Then so we create committees, and in the committees are there for the specific purpose. जब वो purpose over हो गया, so then it is dissolved. So this was the case. Then apart from it, when we are looking at the company's administration in India, so right from the beginning, from 1700s onwards, what we have seen, and in fact not 1700 onwards, you have already read that it is in 1639 Madras, okay, a fort was created, and then Bombay came under the British control in 1668, and then Calcutta in 1698. So these three areas later on, within 25 years after 1700, they turned out to be the three presidencies of the company in India. So these were the three presidencies: Bombay, Bengal, and Madras. Then three presidency. Moreover, all the three presidencies were they were not dependent on each other. Then so they were not dependent on each other. Moreover, they were allowed to transact their own business without consulting with each other. And we can say, in other words, we can say that they were kind of independent governments then, but they had their own limitation. And what was that limitation? They were responsible to or answerable to court of directors in Britain. So they can function separately in India, but then they will answer to the court of directors in Britain. Then, so that is one part. Then moreover, when we look at that what changes will happen after 1773, so 1773 will make Bengal as a supreme power in India, and Bombay and Madras would be subservient to the Bengal. But then there is a time to go into the regulating act. Before that, we need to understand the background of the regulating act also. So I hope you understood. एक बार फिर से मैं रिवाइज कर देता हूँ that how company functioned. Then so most important authority 24 court of director. How they are appointed? Shareholders of the company. Then and shareholders of the company were called as court of proprietors. Then the how they manage the affairs of the company by creating many committees. Then by creating many committees. Moreover, in India, there were 3 presidencies, ठीक है, and these are Bombay, Bengal and Madras, ठीक है. Each of the presidency had their own president, ठीक, ये बीच में बात नहीं किया था. So each of the presidency had president, and then they have a governor council also. So he was either called as president or governor, and his governor council was there. Moreover, each and every decision in presidency was taken with the majority vote in the council. So majority vote in the council, meaning suppose 5 members are there, so there must be 3 votes in the favor of a particular policy, then only it can be effected. So that's the case, and they were not supposed to consult with each other. They were completely free from each other's influence, and they did not needed to consult. But then finally they were answerable to the court of directors in Britain. So this much let's write, and then we go into the background of the regulating act. So you can mention background of the company. British East India Company. So you write, it was a venture capitalist organization. British East India Company was a venture capitalist organization created by many shareholders. Then further you write, created by many shareholders. After this you write, the most important decision making body of company was 24 court of directors. 24 court of directors. Full stop. They were appointed by shareholders of the company. They were appointed by shareholders of the company on annual basis. So this we did not add it in the explanation. हर साल से they were elected. ठीक है? So every year they were chosen on annual basis. Then mention shareholders of the company were also known as court of proprietors. Then in this you write, after this, day-to-day affairs of the company was managed by many of the committees of court of directors. Then उसके बाद लिखो after it paragraph change, and then you write, in India in India, by the mid of 18th century, company created three presidencies. That is Madras, Bombay and Bengal. Madras, Bombay and Bengal. Full stop. Each of the presidency had a president. Each of the presidency had a president who was also known as governor. Of the presidency. Then you write all the decisions in a particular presidency was taken by governor in council. With majority vote. Full stop. Then each of the presidencies were absolute governments. With their own limitations. On any important matter. They were not supposed to keep each other in connivance. But they were answerable to court of directors. Done. So this is what is about the initial part. Okay? So initial part. This is the situation of the company before 1773. But the things will change after 1773. So now you just write a heading, background of Regulating Act. Background of Regulating Act. So as you can see, that what the name suggests, a regulating act, meaning somebody is going to regulate the affairs of the company. And who is that somebody? The British Crown. Okay? So British Crown or through British Parliament. So now understand, first of all. So what was the background? Company became, okay, after the annexation, or not annexation, after the Battle of Plassey and Battle of Buxar, it has acquired a political role in India. Then, so political role in India, earlier kya? The original purpose of the company was to do the trade and commerce in India. But then, while doing this trade and commerce, they developed political aspirations, and then they started to fight with the Indian rulers, and then finally what happened? That they got the political right in the form of Diwani right of Bihar, Bengal, Odisha. So Diwani right is revenue collection right of Bihar, Bengal and Odisha. Then what has happened? So it is the Robert Clive. We have discussed earlier. In 1765, he initiated dual system of administration in Bengal. This dual system of administration, how it divided the things between the ruler and the British. So British had the responsibility of the revenue administration, or basically it's not responsibility, it is actually profit making with the revenue administration. And on the other hand, the controlled Nawab. Obviously, this Nawab of Bengal from 1757, can we say that he was sponsored? Can we use this word? In fact, this was a question. I can give you this in assignment also, but then just listen. So they were sponsored Nawab, and I hope you understand the meaning of the word sponsoring. That when I'm sponsoring somebody for some position, so I want some benefit from that person. Then, so some benefit or maybe some ulterior motives of mine are there. Then, similarly, when Mir Zafar was appointed the Nawab of the Bengal, so he needed to pay off British for this. He paid 2,75,000 rupees immediately, and then after 22.5 million rupees in 3 years. So now this system has started. This system is the system of the dual administration. And dual administration, I think earlier also we wrote Diwani function and Nizamat function. What is Nizamat? Territorial jurisdiction. But then both the that governmental authorities, British and on the other hand Nawab, they have exploited the Bengal peasantry or the subjects of the Bengal, and they were in a confused state. That peasants of the Bengal in a confused state, that what to do, what not to do, and increased oppression of the Bengal peasantry has happened. So now, obviously, it is an opportunity to British Parliament to portray itself as a benevolent ruler of the Britain, and then they showed their that displayed their concern, that they are concerned about the peasantry of India, and company and the rule of the puppet Nawab is leading to their exploitation. So first they started with this, that the British Crown, this maintained that the company's rule is leading to the exploitation of the people. That is not right. So they are just saying that it is not right. Then the next thing was one secret committee was appointed by the British Parliament, and this committee was appointed to look into the corruption which was there in the company. And in fact, there was rampant corruption in the company. So all the company employees, they were in the name of the company, they were misusing the company dastak. Acha, do you remember that this dastak word where we have used? Which place? Royal Farman of 1717. And do you understand the Royal Farman of 1717? But I don't think that I explained the meaning of the word dastak. Have I explained? I know that I have not explained. Okay? So will you try that? What is the meaning of the word dastak? नहीं ये उर्दू वाला नहीं दस्तक था, ठीक है. देखो ये गाने में चलता है बॉलीवुड में, दिल पे किसी ने दस्तक दी. वैसे रिलेटेड है जो तुमने बोला. यस, सिग्नेटरी. दस्तक मीन्स सर्टिफिकेट. ठीक है. Company was given right to issue the certificates. What kind of certificate? For example, this is the product of the company, certified. Okay? This is the product of the company, certified. Okay? So, this is dastak. So, what they were doing, let's suppose company product was, suppose this was a globe, then, but this is not company product, this is a private product. So they were misusing. This was also branded as a company product. So this is how the corruption was rising. We mentioned about private trade and the corruption at that point of time. So they misused. This was already known in Britain that they were misusing these dastaks, and it is leading to the corruption. So that's why there was this committee which was appointed without giving any notice to the British employees in India, and then it submitted the report. So it submitted the report in which it said that almost all the employees of the company, they have collected huge amount of wealth from India, and huge amount of wealth from India in a corrupt manner. In fact, they have got huge jagirs also. And in fact, it used a term that if we start comparing their wealth with the Indian rulers, so they can be better called as Nawabs of London. Then, so this is the report which was submitted at this time. Then one more thing happened. 1771 was one of the most unfortunate year in the history of the Bengal. And why so? Because famine. So great famine was there in the Bengal, and it is said that nearly 1/3 of the people of the Bengal, they died in this particular famine. So now companies' revenue were also declining because of it. Obviously, जब famine है तो लोग kidney बेच के थोड़ी taxes देंगे, and there was no kidney business at that time, obviously. So how come they will be selling the kidneys? So the company revenues were declining. But then जब company का revenue decline होता है, people are not unable to pay. So what it will lead to? Torture. Then so they will be torturing the people. They will be excruciating the people, and this was happening. Then apart from it, one more thing which was there, that it is very amusing then that in 1772 this company which was looting India, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. So कंगाल होने के कगार पे था. And moreover, in 1772 itself, it asked for a loan to British Parliament. And what was the amount of the loan? £1 million. So this is the time that when they applied for this loan, so Parliament was waiting for this as an opportunity. And obviously, why? Because if you're applying for a loan, if you portray yourself as a company which is establishing a British Empire in India, so you must have profit. So they will check your profits, that where are your profits. Then they will check your accounts, that what has happened, how it has happened. So company got the opportunity to check their accounts then, and finally looking at their accounts, they find that there are many anomalies. Then there are many such miscalculations, misappropriation of the funds, and then finally it decided that now this company would be regulated by the British Parliament, or British Parliament on the behalf of the British Crown. So this is how the name came to the picture, that Regulating Act of 1773. So mention, I hope you understood. Okay, so लिखो very first thing. So point में लिख सकते हो, very first thing, dual system of government initiated by Robert Clive. Dual system of government initiated by Robert Clive. Led to exploitation. Led to exploitation of the subjects in Bengal. They were in a hapless situation. What's the meaning of this word, hapless? Please tell. No idea? Anyone? It's not hopeless, it is hapless. Then it means that the situation where you don't know what to do, what not to do, die or live. ठीक है, करें या ना करें, मरे या जिए. ठीक है, बहुत बार ये इस एग्जाम में भी होगा तुम लोग के साथ. And obviously, so it happens. And then I'm just telling you from my own experience that we will go through many such ups and downs, but you need to take the help of the others, your friends and then mentors, to get through that phases. Then, so let's come back to this. What you have written, peasantry of Bengal was in, or subjects of Bengal were in a hapless situation. ठीक है? Then hapless situation. उसके बाद लिखो, British Crown did not wanted to be a mute spectator. British Crown did not wanted to be a mute spectator. When the people of Bengal are oppressed. Done. Then, moreover, after this you write, उसके बाद लिखो, number 2, British Parliament appointed a secret committee to look into the corruption of company. Then corruption in company. Committee found company employees company employees have aggrandized company employees have aggrandized huge amount of corrupt wealth, huge amount of corrupt wealth by misusing the dastaks, by misusing the dastaks. दस्तक ब्रैकेट्स में लिख लो certificates, by misusing the dastaks. It compared the wealth of company officers to that of the native rulers of India, and branded company employees as the new Nawabs of London. Company employees as the new Nawabs of London. New Nawabs of London. Then next point. In 1770, Bengal was under the grip of a great famine, which nearly swiped one third population of Bengal. Full stop. Due to the famine, revenue of company also started to decline. Then next you write, with the declining income of the company, many of the officials started torturing Bengal population. Then further you mention after it, started torturing Bengal population. Full stop. Next one you mention company number, kitna number hai? 4 or 5? Fifth you write, company was on the verge of bankruptcy. And it applied for £1 million loan to British Parliament. £1 million loan to British Parliament. Full stop. Parliament grabbed this opportunity to check the accounts of company. And look into the misappropriation of funds, to look into the misappropriation of funds. Parliament was convinced that company affairs needs to be regulated. Company affairs needs to be regulated. So this is what is the background of the 1773 Act. Okay, so let's go into the provisions of the 1773. But before that, please understand that in this topic, that as we have started, that we'll talk about the background. Not every place, not in each of the act we need a background, but some of them the background is very important. Then, and so in some of them the previous act itself is a background. Then some places we will talk about the defects also, that what are the defects or significance, but that is not a normal process in all of them. So in some of them we talk about defects, some of them we talk about significance, and moreover I am very much convinced what we are going to write, I hope that it will be good enough for the exam purpose. So let's move into the provisions of the act. So mention provisions of the act. Provisions बस लिख के छोड़ दो, ठीक है. So just listen. So as we said that each of the presidency has a president who is also known as governor. Now this act made one change, that the governor of the Bengal, he was made Governor General of the Bengal. Okay? And this term Governor General of Bengal is basically in relation to that he will be prime authority of all the British Indian territories in India. Meaning that earlier when we mentioned that presidency of the Bengal, Bombay and Madras were absolute government in themselves, they did not needed any consultation with each other. But now onwards, since the Governor General of Bengal has been made responsible for all the territories, so then Bombay and Madras will have to consult with him. Okay? And then in all the matters of legislation, Bombay and Madras, now they are subordinate to Bengal. Moreover, that Bengal Governor General, what rights he has. So in relation to the company's affairs in India, he can make any regulation, any ordinance. So not ordinance, he can make any regulation, any rule. But then if he is making any regulation or rule, so then who is that restricting authority in creation of the rules and the regulation? Can you tell that who would be the restricting authority, that whatever rule he is creating, and that rule can be approved or disapproved by whom? Court of directors. Okay? So it will be by court of directors. So that is one part. Moreover, it has also led to creation of the Governor General Council in Bengal. And in this Governor General Council, there had to be 5 members. Okay? So these 5 members, 4 are the executive member and 1 is the Governor General. So in these 4 executive members, they were actually appointed by the British Crown. They were representatives from the British Crown, or basically British Parliament. And then every decision, just like previously we mentioned, that here also every decision is to be taken by the majority vote. And if Governor General, suppose that he gets just support of 1 person and 3 people are on the other side, so he cannot go ahead with rule and regulation. Then, so that is one thing, that he will have to get the majority vote, which means he must get the support of 2 individuals from the council. So that is one part. And then the second thing already we mentioned, ki Bombay and Madras have become subservient to the or subordinate to the Bengal. Then Bombay and Madras have become. Then next one, it led to the creation of, the Supreme Court at Calcutta. Now, anyone who has idea that what would be the jurisdiction of this Supreme Court at Calcutta will be writing, but I'm just asking a question to you, because many a times we do remember more from the questions. And remember that this is the part in which you need more revision than any other part. As you must have encountered in your polity classes also, when you are reading the articles, then when you're reading the particular articles, so then it takes little bit of time to memorize those things. So as for my observation, and I have seen n number of the people, so normal portion if you're revising 3 times, so for same sort of retention you need to revise it 5 times. ठीक है? एंड अभी थोड़ी बहुत देर में मैं मौका भी दूंगा उसको रिवाइज करने के लिए. So understand. So second thing what we said, that Supreme Court was created, and this Supreme Court was created at Calcutta. Then this Supreme Court was having 1 Chief Justice and 3 other judges, and the first Chief Justice was Eliza Empe. So 1774 it was created, and the jurisdiction is limited to Bihar, Bengal and Odisha. So why I'm mentioning the jurisdiction here? क्योंकि बाद में when the expansion of the British is going to happen, so then there will be the issue of the jurisdiction. That it was created for Bihar, Bengal and Odisha, but what about the Bombay? What about the Madras? What about the other areas in Gujarat? Company has many territories. In Maharashtra, company has many territories. So as closer to Goa, so as closer to in some parts of the Kerala also. So then there would be issue of jurisdiction. We'll talk about that later. Then another very important provision was that this particular act, it mentioned that there must not be any private trade, because they have actually traced it, that this corruption can be directly traced to the private trade because of the misuse of the dastaks which were there at this point of time. So that is one thing. Then another very important provision of this act was, it is said that when the company employees are getting retired, or when they are returning back to Britain, or taking a pause from the Indian administration or the role in the company, so once they are in the Britain, so they will have to give a full detail of the wealth that they have acquired in India. Moreover, how they have acquired that wealth in India. So they needed to give this thing. And moreover, one last important provision was that the company employees, okay, they were forbidden to take any kind of gift or present from the natives of India. Then, so any kind of gift or present, because this gift or present, ये बात आई कहाँ से? Because Robert Clive amassed hell lot of wealth then, and whenever it was asked to the Robert Clive कि ये पैसा आया कहाँ से, so he always said that, for example, last time we mentioned that Mir Zafar paid 2,75,000 immediate war indemnity. So war indemnity is counted as war indemnity, but there is no account of 22.5 million rupees. So he often branded that this is a gift from the ruler of the India. Then, and I'll tell you one thing which happened. So this was the time when this Regulating Act has come, and then Robert Clive charges were framed against him, and then he was tried in the court. So when he was tried in the court, so many corruption charges were there, and in fact his wealth was calculated, that how much wealth is there. So then he was intelligent enough to defend himself, and this is how he said that these are the gifts, and you prove that this is a corrupt money that the rulers themselves have given. Then, so the proceedings are happening in Britain. ठीक है, verification कहाँ पे होगा? India में. Then it is not an easy process. And the second thing, that he actually, ठीक है, he actually that declared in this particular court proceeding that shame on you people, shame on everyone who is questioning me, that I created an empire for the British monarch in India. Then, and then I created the British cradle in India, and then asking these questions and blaming these things on me is actually very shameless. So then, after this statement of Robert Clive, all the judges who were there, they became very softer to him, and they all started to think about that. सही तो बोल रहा है, ठीक है, कि हमारी भी कमाई होगी. So he's saying right. And finally, what happened, that he was exonerated from the court process, and he was included in the Hall of Fame. You understand Hall of Fame? Then, so his statue was created in the Hall of Fame. But it's not about giving a gender to the thing. But then there is a very famous phrase, karma is a bitch. Then, and as you know, that what happened to Robert Clive, I just want to share. So Robert Clive had to pay for his own misdoings and wrongdoings in India. He was just 47 when he died then. And what happened? So he was suffering from calculi. You understand what is calculi? Gallstone. Gallstone तो समझ में आता है ना, gall bladder में stone. So he was suffering from gallbladder stone. And obviously in 18th century there was no cure. cure only started to happen in the 19th century. So there was no cure. And what is the cure of gallbladder stone? So dissectomy of the gallbladder. Then no cure was there, and excruciating pain. So he was suffering through excruciating pain, and then moreover, he used to take, the only remedy which was suggested was only pain relievers, and these pain relievers were the morphines. So he used to take a hell lot of morphines, and he was under the impact of the morphine, that his vision impaired, his thinking process impaired, then his body functioning impaired, and then finally one day he was in so much of pain that he took the butter knife. I'm not saying any other knife, okay? So he took the butter knife and he just cut his body with the butter knife many places, drained all the blood and died. So now let's come back to this part you mentioned, provisions Meliko, very first one. Number 1, the company's president of Fort William, also known as Governor of Bengal, the company's president of Fort William, also known as Governor of Bengal, was made Governor General of India. Then Governor General of India, full stop. Then mention after it, Governor General of India. Number 2, Bombay Presidency and Madras Presidency were made subservient to Bengal. In the matters of legislation. Subservient to Bengal in the matters of legislation. Next one, Governor General was entitled to create rules and regulations for the company. Through the Governor General Council. Done? Then mention, usi mein likho, in the same one you write through Governor General Council. These rules and regulations can only be disapproved by Court of Directors. In Britain. Then next you write, Governor General Executive Council was created. Next point, Governor General Executive Council was created. With four executive members and Governor General. Then mention, all the decisions were to be taken with majority vote. Then mention after it, next point, majority vote. अच्छा, एक और provision है that these rules and regulations which are to be created by Governor General. Now let me ask you, ठीक है? It will help you in your polity class also. So for example, Government of India, whatever rules and regulations are created, suppose some act is passed, some bill is introduced and it is passed. So then how it becomes act? सिर्फ पार्लियामेंट में पास हो जाने से? उसके बाद का प्रोसेस क्या है? इट इज प्रेसिडेंट का सिग्नेचर, ठीक है. एंड इज द एक्ट इज ऑल्सो रजिस्टर्ड इन द सुप्रीम कोर्ट? इसको सर से पूछना. आई एम नॉट एक्चुअली, आई एम जस्ट लीविंग दिस क्वेश्चन टू यू, that ask this question: is this particular act which is created, is it to be registered with the Supreme Court? I think logically it must be. The old process which we are going to write was this, that if any act and bill was to be created, so bill to introduce हुआ, जब pass हो गया तो act हो गया. So whenever the act is made, so in 1773 it was to be registered with the Supreme Court. Here also, in today's scenario also, logically I'm telling you, ठीक है, that logically it must be like this, that act अगर जो create हो गया तो then president का seal हो गया, but then the legal backing of the act is always from the judiciary. That's how the enforcement of the act will happen. Then if there is a violation of a particular act, so then that violation of the law, and violation of the law, one can be tried in the court. So if one is tried in the court, so it must have a legal basis of it. So you just verify with the sir. I'm logically telling you because in the historical background this was the case. I have little bit of idea that what has happened after 1947. Then there is a one more question which I'm leaving to you in your polity classes. So you can ask it to the sir, or they will tell you. In fact, I'm also trying to find out this answer. How many of you have any such currency today with you? Any currency you have? बाद में देख लेना. In currency, you count the number of the languages which are written. How many languages are there in constitution? Scheduled languages, 22. Then, so if you count the languages in which the that suppose 500 rupees you have, and what is written? So 500 रुपए, ठीक है, 500 rupees, 25 रुपए. So these all are mentioned. Total 15 languages are mentioned on one side, and if we count Hindi and English, so 17 languages are written. So this is also to be मतलब हमें जानना चाहिए that why when there are 22 scheduled languages, so there are only 17 on the each and every currency, each and every note of India. ठीक है? So let's write in this one. Yes, please tell. See, that's what I'm saying, that I have little idea about that, what has happened. UK is different one. Acha, I'll tell you, since you asked this question, that since these all things were made by the UK, the people from the Britain only. And you know, right from the beginning, in fact, this is one of the provision in the 1773 that UK always kept unwritten constitution for itself, uncodified constitution. But then in case of India, they in 1773 itself they maintained that there would be a written rules for the company, and these written rules of the company took the form of the written constitution of India. So there were two type of the system. They were just keeping one thing separate, Indian administration separate from the British administration. There were copycat things from the British administration in India, but not entirely. So that's why even till this point of time, that if we look at our constitutional process, even in 1935, we'll go into the 1935. So in 1935, who initiated the Government of India Act 1935? British, obviously. And as you must have read in your polity classes in the beginning, that near about how much? 40 to 45% of the Indian Constitution we can trace from the 1935. And 1935 it lays down the foundation of the written constitution once again. So British, they followed two approaches. So that's why I said to you that ask it to the sir. That I'm not very much sure that what is the system, because sir sir will explore this question on your behalf. So then definitely you'll get the answer. I will try to explore on my own end. That actually I'm trying to find out this particular answer. I have already asked to 2-3 people, some renowned people. Let me see that what is their reply. So now, yes, please ask. Huh. Governor of Bengal. Not India. Yes. ओके ओके, वो मेरे से मिस हो गया होगा, बोलने में मिस हुआ होगा. गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया वुड बी 1833. लेट मी सी द कॉपीज यू गिव मी. सो फर्स्ट पॉइंट, वो बोलने में इधर उधर हो गया है, उसमें एक्सप्लेनेशन में कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, ठीक है. सो जस्ट लेट मी सी दैट द company's president of Fort William, also known as governor of Bengal, was was made governor general of Bengal. इसको करेक्ट कर लो, ठीक है, बिकॉज गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया वुड बी इन 1833 विलियम बेंटिक, ठीक है. सो उसको करेक्ट कर लो, गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ, एंड थैंक यू फॉर रिमाइंडिंग मी. सो गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ बंगाल. Then so what provisions we have written, and we can have a very fruitful discussion in the classes. If you have any queries, I'll give you time, okay, sometimes I'll give you time, तो उस time पे मेरे से queries पूछ लो. And moreover at the same point of time make a class dialogue, because मैं भी bore हो जाता हूँ if it is a monologue, so it is boring, and then with the discussions only we can gain much. And I believe that this process of education, थोड़ी सी बात कर रहा हूँ, but just understand that this process of that education is beneficial to me also. Your questions are a vehicle of my improvement, whereby I also explore when you ask some difficult questions to me, and I'm also human being. Sometimes I'll not be knowing, but then I will explore. I will try to get to that answer, and then I can get back to you. Maybe I have more resources. I have more people to ask and more access to the people who are intelligent in that field or who are knowing. So I can do that for you. So we will keep a provision in the class that whereby if you have some intelligent queries, please put it. But एक और चीज ध्यान में रखना, that there is a caveat also, disclaimer, that please don't ask those questions which are not at all prudent and they are not at all intelligent. कोई factual चीजें हैं हम correct कर सकते हैं, we all can correct. Then in fact our class coordination team will also correct it. But then if you have some intelligent query, and how come, from where you will be getting the intelligent query? So you need to see the previous year paper. These are your eyes and ears for all the subjects. Then so previous year paper dekho, that what type of questions UPSC has asked, and accordingly you can frame your questions. Then so let's get back to this particular part. So we mentioned that we were having this discussion on the legal backing. So एक बार लिख लो इसको, that what is the last provision that you have written? Governor General, Supreme Court लिखा नहीं लिखा है. So first you write the act led to the foundation of Supreme Court at Calcutta. The act led to the foundation of Supreme Court at Calcutta in 1774. In 1774. Done? Then mention Supreme Court had three judges and one Chief Justice. Supreme Court had three judges and one Chief Justice. Then mention first Chief Justice was Eliza Impey. First Chief Justice was Eliza Impey. Then next you write after it, नहीं उसी में ऐड करके लिखो, ठीक है. So Chief Justice was Eliza Impey. Jurisdiction of Supreme Court was restricted to Bihar, Bengal, Odisha. Was restricted to Bihar, Bengal, Odisha. Then mention next point, all the rules and regulations created by Governor General Councils, rules and regulations created by Governor General Council were to be registered with Supreme Court. Were to be registered with Supreme Court. Done? Then next point, Regulating Act prohibited private trade of the company. A regulating act prohibited private trade of the company. Private trade of the company. Then next you write. It also, next point, it also mentioned that every company employee on return home needed to give a detailed account of the wealth he has acquired from India and how it has been acquired. Okay? So this is what is about that important provisions of this particular act. Now we need to see the drawbacks of this act. Analysis you can mention. Analysis में हम drawback अपने आप ही देख लेते हैं. So mention a title, analysis of the act. So in analysis, now first understand that we can say intention of the law was good. Okay? Intention of law was good, that why British Parliament wanted to come up with a regulating act or basically cut back on the discretionary powers of the company. So intention was good, that they wanted to regulate the affairs of the company, which was increasingly becoming more corrupt and leading to the exploitation of the Indians. But the problem was many a times that what we intend to do is not there in the actions. Then, so for example, that I suppose if I say that I have a good intention about the poor people of India, but मेरे good intention से क्या उनका घर चलेगा? उसके लिए कुछ करना होगा ना. You will have to do something. That if I start giving some part of my income to them, similarly over here, that the good intention of the British monarch has nothing to do with this act when they have not mentioned a single thing about the welfare of the people of Bengal. So एक हिंदी में बोले तो good intention क्या अचार डालेंगे? That's the reality, that they did not mention anything about the welfare of the people of Bengal. And that was the first thing in the background. Then the second thing is that Governor General's case. He was not given veto power in his council. Then, so I hope you know veto power. That veto power can overpower the decisions of the executive councillors. So now, since he was not given veto power, so he was rendered powerless in his council. Then, so he didn't had any such powers. Not, I will say any such powers. The problem with the executive council that most of the time, 90% of the time, the first Governor General, Warren Hastings, when he was moving with his own decision, the 4 members, they ganged together and they blocked almost 90% of his decisions. So he proved to be ineffective in his own council. He proved to be a decorative piece in the council, whereby he is Governor General of the Bengal, and he is also controlling all the British Indian territory, but then he has no power to go ahead with his own policy. So that is the second problem. Third problem with this was related to corruption. अब corruption को बंद करने के लिए what is required? That to check the corruption. So to check the corruption, कहाँ से start होगा? That rules are created in Britain, then, but the systems must be in place in India. And British they did not created any such big systems then to control the corruption over here. And at the same point of time, whenever Governor General was sending the reports, okay, so sending the reports to British Parliament that these are the issues of the corruption. On the other hand, these 4 members were sending another report. ठीक है कि नहीं ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. So there was not at all cooperation between the big officials of the company itself. And there is one more problem. Corruption तो चलो intact रहा. Private trade was actually not banned. Paper पे तो it is banned, but in reality it was continuing as it is. And the last one is not the least one. There was problem with the jurisdiction. Okay. So though we mentioned that Supreme Court was supposed to try the matters of civil and criminal cases in Bihar, Bengal, and Odisha, but then when it came to the jurisdiction of or judicial powers of Governor General and Supreme Court, दोनों के बीच में कोई clear demarcation नहीं था. ठीक है. So there was one case, very famous case at that point of time, in which not only Supreme Court gave a punishment to that person, but Governor General also gave punishment to that person. So in the modern times and in our constitution, this is what we call double jeopardy. Have you heard about it? Okay, so double jeopardy. So this was the issue, that judicial powers of the Governor General and the Supreme Court were not clearly defined. So these are the drawbacks, and these drawbacks will be serving as the background of the next act. So mention, you write. पहला लिखो, though this act was introduced with good intention, to stop the exploitation of Bengal subjects in the hand of company and puppet Nawab. Company and puppet Nawab. Done? Then mention. But in reality, there wasn't a single provision in the act which was in the favor of people of Bengal. Number 2, mention. This act was more about beginning of centralization of British Indian administration. But in the following years, it proved to be ineffective. Now I'll ask this question to you. ठीक है, बताओ. Question is, tell me how it is starting the centralization of British Indian administration. कैसे समझ में आ रहा है? From which point? बताओ. हाँ, let him tell. एक एक करके बोलो. So हाँ. ठीक है. So देखो, wordings, what you're saying, that is right, but whenever we are going to write, so we'll have to use the correct wordings, that in the matters of legislation. ठीक है. So that itself is a centralizing tendency. You got it? So centralizing tendency. In fact, if the things are taken with a majority vote in the council, that is also one of the centralizing tendency. But the most important is the creation of the position of the Governor of Bengal to the Governor General of Bengal, who will be responsible for all the British Indian territory. Itself is a centralizing thing. And moreover, creation of Supreme Court is also one such feature. Because when you have a judiciary, okay, so centralization, basically that written things would be there, and with the written things, the justice would be delivered on the basis of the written things. So that is also a centralization only. अगर जो written laws नहीं हो, एक बात को समझना, that if there are not written laws, so what will happen? Discretion will be there, and discretion is not a central feature of the centralization. ठीक है? So in 1793 we'll further read about it, this written laws, but I hope you're understanding कि जब किंग का रूल होता था, ठीक है, when the monarchs are there, so there is no written law. राजा रूल लिख के नहीं चलते थे, majority of them. We are not talking about the Chanakya and Asoka and these all people, but if you look at the all the other kingdoms in India, so there are not written rules, and when the not written rules are not there, so it all depends on the understanding of the king and what justice he wants to deliver. Then, and there is also issue of the favoritism. अगर जो जुडिशरी में देखो रिटन रूल्स हैं, सो देयर इज नो सच यूज ऑफ द नो सच केस ऑफ द फेवरेटिज्म, बट रूल्स जहाँ पे लिखे नहीं हैं, दे आर नॉट कोडिफाइड, सो देयर इज ऑलवेज अ केस ऑफ अ फेवरेटिज्म. ठीक है, सो मेंशन फर्दर. Second point already you have written, and third you write Governor General of Bengal was rendered powerless in his council as majority of his decisions were blocked by the four executive members. Number 4, there was no clear demarcation or distinction made between the judicial powers of Governor General and Supreme Court, which often led to confusion and in many instances double punishment. Number, I think, what is the number? 5 or 4? 5, you're right. The corruption of company could not be checked. As there was no system in place. In India. Done. Then उसी में लिखो further, you write which further resulted into continuation of corrupt private trade. Then next point you write corrupt private trade. After that, what I mentioned? कोई एक और point रह गया है. Which point? I'm also today, I'm little bit, मुझे भी दिमाग से उतर रहा है. The last one, and judiciary already we have mentioned, and Governor General rendered powerless in his council, and Bengal people, I think already we have done all of it. Then, so we have done all of it. Now just listen. So next thing is basically that some of the problems of this particular act was to be addressed. Then, so in 1781, okay, in 1781, one act came which is known as the Amending Act of the 1781. It tried to address only one problem, and that problem was the jurisdiction of the Governor General and Supreme Court. So do you have any idea that who became the judicially more powerful? Governor General. Okay, so now Governor General was made more powerful and Supreme Court came under Governor General. Is there any logic that why it was done? because अब फिर से वापस से समझो, ठीक है? Let's connect the things that we are reading and writing today. We mentioned that jurisdiction of the Supreme Court was in Bihar, Bengal, Odisha, but then there is a Bengal also, there is Bombay also, there is a Madras also, then which is not coming under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So then, when it comes to the cases related to that, Governor General of Bengal is made responsible for all of it. So then he must have the powers which is bigger than the powers of the Supreme Court. So that's why this anomaly which was there, it was corrected in the 1781. But rest of the things were not corrected. And rest of the things will be corrected in the, or British government will try to correct in the 1784 Act. So mention, you write, अब अलग से लिखना, ठीक है? That, or note करके लिख सकते हो, you write a note, and in note you mention the amending act of 1781, the amending act of 1781, and you can underline this part. Amending Act of 1781 placed the judicial powers of Governor General above Supreme Court. Placed the judicial powers of Governor General above Supreme Court. Okay, above Supreme Court. So now this analysis itself is serving the background of the 1784 Act. So let's go into the next act, which was Pitt's India Act of 1784. Pitt's India Act of 1784. So when it comes to Pitt's India Act 1784, why this kind of name is there? So this name is because of, named after the British Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger. Moreover, we talked about this act. Can you tell me which place? कहाँ पे? एक provision मैंने mention किया, लिखवाया भी है copy में. Yes, you're right. But which place? Mysore, 1784. When Treaty of Mangalore has happened. याद आया? So Treaty of Mangalore has happened. Tipu Sultan was victorious in Battle of Palilur, and then after British were victorious at some other places, so war proved to be inconclusive, and the Treaty of Mangalore happened. And at the same point of time, Treaty of Mangalore was reflecting the ethos of the 1784 Act, which said that there must not be interference by the British East India Company in the native affairs of the Indian rulers. But then we also mentioned that this was one such thing which was more violated than it was kept. So let's come to the 1784 Act. It is an interesting act. That 1784, they are going to change many things in through this act. The first and the foremost provision of it, since the corruption of the company could not be controlled, the British government has to think over it, that how they will be controlling the corruption and who were the main vehicles of the corruption. Can you tell that who were the main vehicles of the corruption? Any such ounce of idea? See, batao. The employees in India, they are the first layer of the corruption. But you know, if the corruption has entered into the system, and then even after many acts and regulation, if it is not getting corrected or reduced, the responsibility goes to the higher authorities. And who are higher authorities? Court of Directors. Then, so Court of Directors were also very corrupt, and that was the reason that why corruption was. So now British Parliament figured out कि actually इंडिया में तो corruption तब रुकेगा जब यहाँ से रुके. That when 24 Court of Directors, they reform themselves. And now, so to control these all things, the British government or British Parliament, okay, they created a board of control. Then, so they created a board of control, and this board of control was made responsible to check the civil, military, and revenue affairs of the company. Okay. So civil, military, and revenue affairs of the company. And moreover, this board of control, you can say that it was actually the body of the British Council, that British Parliament, and it had 6 members. So anyone who knows that who would be the 6 members? Any idea? I'll tell you. Okay. And now one more question before I will ask. How many of you have already started reading history or any such part of the history and polity में जो भी कुछ पढ़ चुके हो क्लास में आने से पहले? See, I would not be terrorizing you. I'm just asking a question. So अगर जो पता हो तो बताओ, ठीक है. Secretary of State, have you heard about this position? Secretary of State, and when it came to reality, that particularly when it relation to the Indian administration, at, from what time onwards? So generally, अब ध्यान से समझ लेना, most of the books they have omitted this information. They mention the Secretary of the State from 1858. Then they mention Secretary of State from 1858, but then in 1858, what will be writing? Government of India Act 1858, that Secretary of State was one of the minister in the British cabinet. But was it the minister of the British cabinet from 1857, or was he not there before? He was there. Then he was there. So it is just like that in Indian government. जैसे आज का टाइम पे हम बात करते हैं, so prime minister, ठीक है, and then we have many cabinet ministers. So many cabinet ministers, and these cabinet ministers have different roles. So just like the same, in British Parliament there is a British Prime Minister, and then after there are many such ministers. One of the minister was called as Secretary of the State. Then, so this position is right there from the glorious revolution of the Britain in 1688 when the British Parliament was created. Then, now understand. So Secretary of State has a role in the Indian administration right from the 1784 itself. And how come? So the Board of Control, which is going to be created, it had 6 members. Then, so it had 6 members, and out of these 6 members, one was the Secretary of the State. Then one was the British Exchequer Chancellor. What do we mean by British Exchequer Chancellor? Finance Minister. Very good, exactly. So British Exchequer Chancellor is the British Finance Minister is also the part of it. So Chancellor, and then 4 Privy Council members. So Privy Council members are basically appointed by the British Crown. Then these 2 are the part of the Parliament, and these 4 are the part of the Crown. So these were the members. Out of these members, एक और चीज ध्यान में रखना, that the Secretary of State, he was the President of Board of Control. ठीक है, so ऐसा नहीं है that Secretary of the State position in 1858 it came all of sudden, he became so important. In fact, sometimes he became more important than the Viceroy of India. So he was already there in place from 1784 itself. Now you got it. So this Board of Control was created, and this Board of Control will further regulate the affairs of the company. They will look after the affairs, that the doings of the Court of Directors, and Court of Directors are looking at the doings of the company employees in India. Now, अब question ये है that how effective this system would be there. Will it be effective? That when suppose I become corrupt, ठीक है, मेरे ऊपर किसी को बिठा दो, then that some authority, what if he becomes corrupt? So then you will appoint one more authority, and what if he becomes corrupt? So then it is a kind of adding layer after layer. Then, because it is all in the nature of the human society that when they see something lucrative, so they tend to become corrupt. So I'll just bring a corollary at this point of time, that for example, Lokpal Bill you all must have heard, then when it was in 2011. And what was the main argument? That if the cabinet ministers and then in fact the prime minister, if they all become corrupt, so there must be somebody to see the prime minister to check his corruption. But what is the guarantee that Lokpal, the person who is Lokpal, he will not become corrupt? Already there is a judiciary in place, then which is looking after the corruption and everything in the Indian scenario. In fact, there were some Indian prime ministers who were framed in some of the cases, and then they were found guilty also. So then the nation knows that what happened to them. Then, or not what happened to them, the nation knows that they went through the judicial proceedings. So when there is already a system in the place, so then adding one more layer is actually misappropriation of the resources of the country. Similarly, the same thing happened over here. Actually, it happened over here. We were repeating in the 2011, and that's why the bill did not become successful. So Board of Control was created, but the question rises that will they be effective? We'll see later on. Now another thing, another very important part, that British Parliament from here onwards, it started to fully control the company's affairs in India. Then company's affairs in India, so there was one part that we say this act led to the joint rule in India, and joint rule of whose and whose? British East India Company and British Crown. Okay? So British Crown. So British East India Company and British Crown. So this question has been asked, I think ये 2015 से 2017 के बीच में है. किसी year they asked that which of the act initiated the joint rule in India. So 1784 initiated the joint rule in India, and this joint rule is of the British Parliament, British Crown, and then the British East India Company. Moreover, now understand, company was asked to separate its commercial and its political accounts. Okay, so to separate its political and, or basically to separate its political revenue account with the commercial account. What does it mean? You need to understand that commercial account is basically related to the business and transaction of the company, the commercial aspect of the company. In fact, British East India Company has come to India with a particular trade perspective. So they have a profit or loss from that particular trade. And now in India, they became a semi-sovereign political authority. Do you understand this word semi-sovereign political authority? After which particular year we can say that British became semi-sovereign political authority in India? 1765. Diwani right. Then, so Diwani right के बाद they became semi-sovereign, and after 1773 they will become completely sovereign. ऐसा तो नहीं लग रहा कि उड़ के जा रहा है दिमाग से, समझ पा रहे हो ना? And it is good that history polity classes are happening together, because दोनों के बीच में काफी मतलब अच्छा relation होता है. Then that what you studying in polity you can understand little bit in history, and then what you study in history you can understand more in polity. So इस बात को ध्यान में रखना that semi-sovereign authority, the company became semi-sovereign authority in 1765 with the Diwani right. And why we are calling semi-sovereign? Because they don't have, they are not going ahead with a territorial jurisdiction, that is Nizamat function. But then after the regulating act of the 1773, it will become a sovereign authority in Bengal. So now you got it. So अब फिर से वापस से समझना that commercial account and the political account must be separated. Why political account? Because in political account they are getting revenue from the Diwani right of the Bihar, Bengal and Odisha, okay, as a political right, and they have the revenue from the revenue or loss from the trade aspect of the company. So when the accounts are separated, Parliament can look into it, that which is why that company's commercial aspect, is it profit making or loss making. When they get to know that if it is loss making, so what they can do? They can wind up the operations of the company, or they can close the operations of the company. This is what happens. If you look at the present scenario, that many PSUs are there in the Indian government. Relate karo topics ko, okay? So many PSUs are there in the Indian government, and these PSUs are either profit making or loss making. If they are profit making, so they will be given the titles like Navaratna, Maharatna, Mini Ratna. But if they are not performing, if they are going into the loss, so what are the options before the government? Dissolve the company or sell it to, privatize it. Give me the example of privatization. Recent, Air India, very good, exactly. So Air India, so it completely got privatized. So this is what the British government will also do, ठीक है? कि company के अगर जो trade aspect से profit नहीं है, so then it must be winded up. And what company people were doing? कि trade में तो loss है, ठीक है? That in commercial aspect of the company there was a loss, but they were mixing the political account and they were showing कि नहीं घाटा नहीं है, मुनाफा चल रहा है. Then so you got it. So that's why the provisions are good, that they wanted that accounts to be separated. That's one thing. Then moreover, one more problem they tried to solve. And what was this problem? Problem of the power of the Governor General in his council. So this particular act, how many members were there in the Executive Council? 4. So 4 members were there. It reduced their numbers to 3. Okay? And now 1 Governor General and 3 Executive Councillors. The expectation of the government was that if the Governor General gets support of at least 1 member, so then 2-2 equal, दोनों केस में किसी decision पे, and 2-2 equal, but wherever is the Governor General, he will have the casting vote. Have you heard this in your polity? अभी तो नहीं पढ़ा होगा, but classes में I think you read it in the Parliament, casting vote. But I hope you understand what is casting vote. So in casting vote, wherever, whichever side Governor General would be there, even if there is a equality of the vote, so that would be the majority. So this was expected कि ऐसा हो जाएगा, तो फिर then Governor General would be more effective. Then and for the first time in this act, ठीक है? We are seeing that कि इसके पहले in 1773 there was nothing which was mentioned like that the company's territory in India are British possession, but then here it clearly mentions that company's possession are British possession, which means that claim of the British crown is also there in the territory in India. And one last thing which we wrote in the Mysore wala, ठीक है? Here also we can write the same stuff. So mention, you write. It was named after British Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger. William Pitt the Younger. Then provisions, सीधे provisions पे आ जाओ, ठीक है? And in provisions you write number 1, to further regulate the affairs of company, a new body or a new body लिखो, new body was created known as Board of Control, known as Board of Control, with 6 members. Then you write, out of the 6 members, one was Secretary of State. थोड़ा sentence correct कर लेना, framing I think has gone haywire in this one. So out of the 6 member, or these 6 members included, that would be better. Out of the 6 member doesn't seems good. Correct कर लो, थोड़ा cut कर लो, will be better. So these 6 members included Secretary of State, Chancellor of the British Exchequer, and 4 Privy Council members, Privy Council members, ठीक है? Then further write, Secretary of State who was a cabinet minister in the British government, was made president of Board of Control. Then President of Board of Control. Then after it you write, Board of Control was supposed to, next point, अब अलग से लिखो, ठीक है? Board of Control was supposed to regulate the civil military. Board of Control was supposed to regulate the civil military and revenue affairs of the company. And also oversee the functioning of court of directors. And further oversee functioning of court of directors. Then next point, it asked company to clearly distinguish between commercial account and political revenue account. commercial account and political revenue account of company. Revenue account of company. Now once again I am stopping. I just wanted to add. I'm thinking that I must add. ठीक है, एक बार रुक जाना इस पे लिखने पे रुक जाओ. Have you heard about? So since we are teaching and I am asking, have you heard about? तुम पढ़ना start करोगे तब तो. So माल अदालत. No idea. So and अच्छा, have you heard about the word मालगुजारी? नहीं, ये तो common word है मालगुजारी. So हाँ, माल अदालत is basically related to the revenue codes. And so revenue codes, इसमें नहीं लिखो कोई भी, ठीक है. Revenue codes is related to the 1773. So just listen. When the Supreme Court was created in 1773, so it also ended the माल अदालत. उसके पहले एक बार ध्यान से सुन लो, बाद में लिखना तुम लोग. That before creation of the Supreme Court, obviously the company is operating in India, and whenever any issues are there with the revenue or any issue with the revenue, so it must be adjudicated. How it was adjudicated? So it was adjudicated through the Mal Adalats. Then, but with the creation of the 1774 Supreme Court, Mal Adalats came to an end. चाहो तो इसके बाद में एज अ नोट करके लिख लेना, ठीक है. अभी छोड़ दो. I'll dictate this part, but remind me कि मुझे लिखवाना है ये बात, ठीक है. Now let's come back to this part. So what you have written? हाँ, ठीक है. So the next point you write after it, for the very first time. No, रुक जाओ, लिखा तो नहीं. So this act initiated, this act sequence सही होना चाहिए, ठीक है. This act initiated joint rule of, this act initiated joint rule of British East India Company and joint rule of British East India Company and British Crown in India. Joint rule of British East India Company and British Crown in India. Then next you write after it, joint rule के बाद, for the very first time, for the very first time, company's territory in India was referred as, company's territory in India was referred as British possession in India. Was referred as British possession in India. Then after it you write British possession in India, full stop. Next point. One executive member was removed from Governor General Council. One executive member was removed from Governor General Council so that if Governor General of Bengal gets the support of one member, if Governor General of Bengal gets support of one member, then with casting vote, he can go ahead with his decision. He can go ahead with his decision. ठीक है. Then next you mention after it, last one you write जो already मैसूर में लिख चुके हो, so that one. One of the provision was non-interference. One of the provision was non-interference in the native affairs of India by company. Non-interference in the native affairs of India by company. Done. So let's look at the one analysis of this this particular act and what are the main themes in the drawbacks. So first of all, the discussion that we were having in the beginning, the creation of a new body may not result into elimination of the corruption, because human behavior, human nature is highly subjective. So human behavior and human nature is highly subjective. Then, and moreover, there was what was noted down, that there was a clear nebulous connection or nexus developed between this board of control and court of directors. The reason was, बाद में we will be talking about it. There was one very important power with the court of directors, and what was the power? The Indian appointments. Okay, they were the one who were making Indian appointments, and these Indian appointments on the official level is called as civil services. Then, so it was very lucrative. This civil services in India was very lucrative, and lucrative not because that what salary they are getting. It was lucrative because of the private trade, and huge profits were there. So not only court of directors, since it was a nomination process, तो exam तो होता नहीं था. Nears and dears ones were appointed. Now the board of control were also interested in it. Then that nears and dears one will be appointed, and moreover, the members who were there in the board of control, these 6 members, they also developed interest to get a proceed from the corrupt money. Okay, so proceed from the corrupt money. So the corruption, the corruption did not stop, and corruption continued as it is. Then, and then the provision that we mentioned, that interference, non-interference policy, was it going to stop? It did not stop. In fact, after it, you see that more imperial designs were there against the Indian rulers, and Wellesley, when he has come to the reality, when he has come to picture, so he has gone further ahead with it. In fact, एक और provision बता रहा हूँ, ठीक है? Dalhousie के पहले, not Dalhousie, Wellesley के पहले, who was there? John Soar, and with before John Soar was Cornwallis. Cornwallis was from 1785 to 93. Cornwallis came up with a policy effective control. I think I mentioned somewhere, not in your batch, in some other batch I have mentioned. So effective control. What was this effective control policy in 1792? In effective control, what he did, that he mentioned to all the company employees that if there are some issues or if there are mutual hostilities between the Indian rulers, so take the best advantage of it. So then, on one hand, 84 has said something, and within 4 or 5 years, it was tossed in the air. Then, and people, that company started to follow once again its own whims and fancies, not whims and fancies, but its own conviction that what that was basically, we cannot rule in India for very long without the policy of the interference. So they continued with it. So mention analysis of the act. Analysis में लिखो. And one more thing was there. Analysis में अब ये बताओ, Governor General को that to make him little powerful, one member was removed. One member was removed so that he can get the support of the another member. Batao nahi, I am telling you. In fact, once again, the same situation was there. That even when the 3 members are there, now they became more united, these 3 members. And in fact, during the tenure of the Warren Hastings, he has to, okay, he has to rub his nose to get his way. Then, and they ganged together all the time, and here also is this time also 90% of his decisions were blocked by them. So once again, he is powerless only. So you write, mention. पहला लिखो, ठीक है? That a nebulous connection or nexus. I'm writing on board. Just see spelling. A nebulous connection or nexus developed between board of control and court of directors. Board of control and court of directors. Court of directors. And they further started indulging in corruption. They further started indulging in corruption. Indulging in corruption. Then number 2 you write after it. indulging in corruption. Policy of non-interference. Policy of non-interference was not followed in spirit. Policy of non-interference was not followed in spirit, but in fact, but in fact, but in fact, it was the most violated provision of 1784. Most violated provision of 1784. Number 3. Once again, decisions of Governor General, once again, decisions of Governor General were left to the mercy of executive councillors. Was left to the mercy of executive councillors who were determined to block the decisions of Governor General. Then, so though some progress has been made from this particular act, but not entirely. 5 minute break लो, तुरंत जाओ, तुरंत आ जाओ. Then we'll continue. So it's just 5 minutes. I'm here only. We'll leave you by 11:30. Okay. So now let's come to the third act. Okay. So mention Charter Act of 1793. So Charter Act of 1793. So now listen, as the name suggests, it is Charter Act, which means, remember in the very first class what we mentioned, that company was given charter for 15 years, but then it was given for the infinite period till further notice. So now from here onward the notices will start. Okay, ab infinite nahi hoga. So right from that time we can say that till this point of time there was no such disruption in their charter, but from here onwards it is the British authority to decide that how many more years their privileges would be intact. So Charter Act of the 1793, the very first thing that we can mention about it is the renewal of the charter of the company for next 20 years after the expiry in 1813. Once again the government will decide that it will be renewed or not, and if it will be renewed, so on what terms and conditions. So it is renewed for next 20 years, meaning that पीछे जो भी privileges थे previously, all the privileges of the company which were there with the company, now still they are intact. And so still they are intact. Now the second provision is a very important provision of this particular act. Company was allowed to increase its dividend to 10%. Now do you understand this word dividend? What is that? बताओ. Profit. हाँ, अभी देखो इकोनॉमिक्स में पढ़ोगे ये सब डिविडेंड एंड ऑल दैट. यहाँ पे हम बस इसको इतना ही तक लिमिट रखते हैं कि दिस इज अ प्रॉफिट. सो कंपनी वाज अलाउड टू इंक्रीज इट्स डिविडेंड टू 10%. Then there were some interesting takeaways from this particular act. So what are the interesting takeaways? Now we can see that later on, जब बाद में we will be talking about that drain of wealth from India, ठीक है? And I hope some of you must have heard that drain of wealth theory was proposed by Dadabhai Nauroji. How this drain of wealth is happening? So the very important provision of it, that though the company was allowed to increase its dividend to 10%, but then company was also supposed to pay 5 lakh rupees annually to British Crown. Okay, so after that whatever the revenue that is there from India, okay, they will be paying 5 lakh rupees to the British Crown. Apart from it, it was also said कि India में जो भी officials हैं, ठीक है, जो भी officials हैं, these all officials, their salary, their expenses, their pensions will be paid from the Indian revenue. It will not be paid by the British Treasury. So it will be paid by the Indian revenue. It will not be paid by the British Treasury. one more thing, okay? Further Parliament said that if the case arises, okay, so not just 5 lakh, the British Crown can take the entire profit from India. So that was very important provision. So now you see that कि पहले तो company लूट रही थी, but now the British Crown is also interested in the earnings which is there from India. And at this point of time, I just happen to remember one such news report in I think 1 week back. There is a very famous news anchor in Britain, and then what he said on the success of Chandrayaan. I think you know this controversy, that what he said, that Britain must not pay to India to fund their moon activities, their space activities. Then, and now he was incorrect on factual basis also, that what Britain has provided to India in the recent times, and moreover he was actually not very much aware that these were expenses related to their own agreements and all. It was not a dole out to the Indians. Then, and on the other hand, okay, these are the shameless bunch of people who are saying that they are providing to India. In fact, they are surviving just because of India. They looted the country to such an extent that they are still surviving and they became a developed nation. So it needs to be called. And if these kind of informations are there, so it needs to be condemned all the time. So let's come back to this part. So now you got it. So from here, the organized loot of the country will start. Then पहले तो 5 लाख है, और 5 लाख बहुत बड़ा amount होता है. So it is a big amount. Then the second thing, that another provision of this particular act was the mention of the written laws. So it said, okay, this particular act said that from here onwards, the governance of the India, okay, or British Indian territory will be on the basis of the written laws, not on the basis of the personal rule of the rulers. Okay, so not on the basis of the personal rule of the rulers. Then they further mentioned that these all written laws, it will also be translated and published in the local languages. And local languages, other word we use, or normal word we use, vernacular languages. Why? So if it is published in the local languages, so people like us, okay, we can know that हमारे rights क्या हैं, what are the rights of the common people, what are the rights related to their property. Then, so they can also be aware about it. So it was a new beginning, and this is the question that you asked. So written thing. So written thing was already there related to company in 1773, but from here onwards, the entire Indian administration would be on the basis of the written law. And then further progress will be made in 1833 when the Law Commission would be appointed to codify the Indian laws. Then, and in fact this part, मतलब मुझे ऐसा hunch है, ठीक है, कि I'm of the view that maybe this year once again there would be question from either from starting from 1793 to 1833, because the IPC and CRPC is going to be combined, and then the new thing which is going to come, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. I think this is the new name. So इसको एक track रखना, news में जो भी आ रहा है, keep a track of it. So this was the third provision. And then the fourth provision is Warren Hastings went back from India in 1785. And then who came? Cornwallis. Cornwallis is considered to be the one of the most important person as far as the British administration in India is concerned, because he consolidated the British administration in India, and he was very vocal, he was very assertive. So when he was appointed in India, he said to the British Parliament that I don't want to be a decorative piece. Then that I don't want to be a decorative piece, that he is a Governor General of India, he looks better then. And then what I need, that I need the concrete powers, the powers with which I can go ahead with my own policy. And if the government is not ready for it, I'll not be going there. Then the government gave him in 1786 itself, it gave him the overriding power in his council, but it was not through any legislation, किसी act के through नहीं था, ठीक है? He was just given, ठीक है, overriding power in his council. So now, because this overriding power was given to Cornwallis, he was able to consolidate civil services, he was able to consolidate police services, and so as the judiciary. But then when Cornwallis is gone in 1793, so now it was felt by the British government that this overriding power is necessary. And it was further extended to all the Governor Generals who will be coming to India from here onwards. Then one of the member इसको भी ध्यान से समझना. One of the member before this 1793 in the executive council was commander in chief of the British forces, British Indian forces. Now he was removed from the council. ठीक है. So commander in chief of the British forces, no more he would be part of the British Indian executive council of the governor general. Then another provision is related to the salary expenses. Already we mentioned that these salary expenses, it will not be borne out by the British Treasury, but it will be paid by the Indian revenues. So mention, right? It renewed, number one, it renewed the charter of company. It renewed the charter of company for next charter of company for next 20 years. For next 20 years. Then mention after it charter of company for next 20 years. Second point you write, company was allowed to increase its dividend to 10%. Allowed to increase its dividend to 10%. But after deducting all its expenses in India, they needed to pay 5 lakh rupees to the British Crown on annual basis. They needed to pay 5 lakh rupees to British Crown on annual basis. Then on annual basis, full stop. Then mention after it. Usi mein, same statement you write. It was further mentioned that if the need arises, British Crown can take over. If the need arises, British Crown can take over the entire revenue surplus of India. Can take over the entire revenue surplus from India. Then next provision after it. It laid the foundation of Indian governance. On the basis of written laws. Okay, I'm repeating, just 1 minute. It laid the governance of I forget. Just give me 1 minute. It laid the foundation of Indian government on the basis of written laws. Full stop. It further maintained, same statement you are writing after full stop. It further maintained that personal rule of the rulers will not be applicable. And written laws will further be translated in the vernacular languages so that people can know about their rights and immunities. Done. Then next you write. How many points you have written? 3 points you have written. So background भी इसी में add कर दे रहा हूँ fourth point में, ठीक है? So लिखो. First you write, or you can write as a note, and then we'll write the point. ठीक है? Mention. In 1785, when Cornwallis became Governor General of India, no, Bengal, sorry, Governor General of Bengal, he demanded overriding power in his council. Overriding power in his council. Then in 1786, with special provisions, he was given overriding power in his council. Overriding power in his council. Then mention overriding power in his council, full stop. अब provision लिखो 1793 में number 4 ना. So in 4 you write, this act further extended overriding power to all the governor generals. Then next point, all the governor generals. Now commander-in-chief of British Indian forces, ये point number 5 लिख लो, ठीक है? So now commander-in-chief of British Indian forces was no more part of executive council. Should I tell you one interesting fact over here? Yes or no? So you know how Governor General Cornwallis was given overriding power? He was actually given the position of the commander-in-chief of the British Indian forces. So he has 2 votes. One vote was the vote of the commander-in-chief, and 1 vote was the vote of the governor general. Okay, so that's how he had the overriding power. Okay, now Governor General of Bengal will be no more from 1793. He will be no more commander-in-chief of the forces. अब ये position separate हो गया, and position separate करने के बाद they removed the commander-in-chief of the forces from the council. ठीक है? So this is what is the reason that why he was given the overriding power. इसीलिए किसी legislation की special legislation की जरूरत नहीं पड़ी. Provision they incorporated, but this is how they tinkered with the rules. Then the next one you write, the salaries of the British officials, or salaries of the Governor General लिखो, ठीक है? Salaries of the Governor General and other important officials was to be paid from Indian revenue, Indian revenue, and not from British Exchequer. Then, so this is what is about the Charter Act of the 1793. Then, so here we are not writing any analysis about it, then, since it was more of a charter, and then it was more related to that regulation of the Companies Affair further. So let's look at the background of the 1813 Act, and title you mention Charter Act of 1813. And first we'll talk about the background. So background of this act. So the background, now understand. 1789, French Revolution. After the French Revolution, rise of Napoleon in France. So rise of Napoleon in France, and France was the arch rival of the Britain. Moreover, on one hand, rise of Napoleon in France, on the other hand, in India, the entire trade from India and also from China was dominated by just one company, and name of the company was British East India Company. So now only one company is operating, and any other company from Britain is not allowed to enter into the Indian market, and so as in the Chinese market. At this point of time, by 1800, 1790, industrial revolution has picked up pace in Britain, and there are many industries in Britain. There are many manufacturers. They have their products done. So industrial revolution has been on the climax, and many manufactured goods are there. So when hell lot of manufactured good is there, they must get the market to sell these all products. On one hand, this was there. On the other hand, what Napoleon is doing in the Europe. So Napoleon, after his rise, he created continental system, and this continental system was created with two decrees or order for the time being, we can say. So these two orders are known as one. The very first one was in 1806, Decree of Berlin and Decree of Milan, and many countries, or in fact majority, 90% of the countries from Europe, they became the member of the continental system of Napoleon. Napoleon, through these decrees, he banned any kind of trade with Britain. So any kind of trade with Britain, and moreover, these countries who are part of the continental system, they cannot purchase the goods from Britain. So on one hand, there is hell lot of manufactured good in Britain. There is complete cutoff of the European market for them, where they will sell their goods. They can sell their goods in India and China, and India and China has a very clear distinction right from the inception of the history, that we made half of the humanity on the planet Earth always. So at least आधी दुनिया की तो market हमारे यहाँ है. But then the problem was that these manufacturers, they cannot come to India, because the trading company, this British East India Company, has the monopoly, right, that trade monopoly rights in India and China. Now these people, they started to create pressure on the British Parliament. These industrialists of the Britain, they started to create pressure, that they maintained in the British Parliament that if they are not able to sell their manufactured goods in these market, so then their manufactured goods will become inventory. I hope you understand inventory. Inventory का मतलब, हाँ, जो stock बिका ही नहीं, ठीक है? So they will become inventory, and when they will become inventory, so at the same point of time, their profit will be going down, and when their profit are going down, so industry production will go down, and if industrial production will go down, employment will go down, and employment will go down, so inflation will be there in the society. Now everything interconnected to the economy, you can understand that what will be the bigger repercussion of it on the British economy. And moreover, the benefits which Britain is going to get from the industrial revolution will be going down the dustbin. And so this is what they said. And one more thing, okay? They made their case very strong with the popular theory at that time. And what was the popular theory? Laissez-faire. Then who gave the laissez-faire? Adam Smith. Then I hope you know, he's a British thinker. And what is laissez-faire theory? Free trade theory. Okay? So free trade theory. In free trade, what happens, that what he was opining, that Adam Smith, he was of the view that in an economy, when there are many players, then so there is a competition, and in the competition, who survives? The person who gives the best services, they survive, and rest of the people are eliminated. And this is how we need to operate, that when the monopoly is given to one person or one company, so it leads to the ruination of the customer services, and it leads to the ruination of the product. So for example, that if British East India Company, okay, only this company is allowed to produce Bisleri in India, then, and no other company is allowed to produce any other water bottle. Kinley cannot come to India, Aquafina cannot come to India, then so many such, Himalayas cannot come to India, Vedika, जो भी पानी के नाम है, एक एग्जाम्पल दे रहा हूँ. So when only one company is allowed to manufacture these water bottles, so then what they will do? No matter जो भी क्वालिटी दे, तुमको तो खरीदना पड़ेगा क्योंकि यही एक बॉटल है. When other players are there, so you have the choices. Then you have the choice to purchase whichever is good. इसका पानी अच्छा नहीं लगा, किसी और का खरीद लिया. So this is what is the logic which Adam Smith has actually saying, that free trade theory must be there, that there must be competition in the economy, and when there is a competition, so it actually benefits to the. I think we have done this discussion in the Bengal. Then so now you understand. So it also created pressure on the British Parliament, and finally it was a precarious situation for not only for the British manufacturers, but also it was an important moment in the history of the Britain that they needed to take a decision, and they took the decision in this regard. So what was the very first provision of it? First provision, that companies' monopoly of trade will not be there. Okay? So monopoly of trade is going to end, but then companies also, ठीक है, अब ऐसा तो है नहीं कि अचानक से सब कुछ बंद हो जाएगा, all of a sudden everything will stop. So company argued for that, it made its own case that it's because of what we have done in India, that's how you have got the empire. So then don't cut our privileges so soon. So then it was said that company can retain its free trade in India, ठीक है, monopoly of free trade from India, and it can retain monopoly of trade with the China. Okay? So these two things, these two places in India, tea trade monopoly and trade with China monopoly of the company. Moreover, company was further said that you can increase your dividend to 10.5%. पिछले वाले में कितना था? 10%, and at this point of time 10.5%. And now rest of the British industries and people from the Britain were allowed to operate from India. So this was the major provision. We'll talk about some others later on. So you're right. लिखो. So लिखना, after the French Revolution, there was rise of Napoleon in France. Napoleon in France, who was arch rival of Britain. Then mention Napoleon created continental system. With which majority of the European countries got aligned. Full stop. In 1806, Napoleon released Decree of Berlin, and in 1807 Decree of Milan. Which completely forbid any kind of trade with Britain. Done. Then mention. अब पैराग्राफ चेंज करके लिखो. Meanwhile, industrial revolution in Britain was at the climax, which led to emergence of large number of manufacturers in Britain. Full stop. But after the orders of after the Napoleon orders of Napoleon, European market was completely cut. European market was completely cut for British traders, and manufacturers. Then these manufacturers started to assert pressure no sorry started to assert pressure on British Parliament to provide access to Indian and Chinese market, which was monopolized by British East India Company. Then mention after it. Moreover, the laissez-faire theory. I am writing on board. You can see laissez-faire theory of Adam Smith. Which was very popular in Europe. Favored the age of monopolies. Favored the end of age of monopolies and beginning of free trade age. Then got it, all of you? Is it too fast or okay? Okay, I'll have to see the copies. I'll tell. Okay, no issues. That's why I asked that. Is it too fast? Nahi hua hai. I'll see your copy and I'll tell you. Moreover, the laissez-faire theory of Adam Smith, which was very famous in Europe, favored the end of age of monopolies. And beginning of age of free trade or free trade age. So this was the last line. So now provisions likho. Number 1 you write. Number 1, it renewed the charter of company. For next 20 years. But ended company's monopoly of trade in India. Next point you write. Number 2, however, company retained tea trade, chai patti wala tea, so tea trade and trade with China. Rest of the provisions, just listen. So rest of the provisions I mentioned that company was further allowed to increase its dividend to 10.5%. Okay? But then it was also said, remember previous one they said that company will increase their dividend to 10%, but they will have to pay after bearing all the expenses, and they will have to pay 5 lakh rupees to British Crown. Now, wo to 5 lakh rupees they will have to give, but it also said that after bearing all the expenses and everything, company will have to spend 1 lakh rupees on promotion of education in India. Then, so on promotion of education in India. Moreover, this is going to be a major bone of contention from 1813 onwards, because the Britishers started to fight on the question that what must be the mode of education, English medium or the vernacular medium, and what all things must be taught in India. So just because of this discussion, they delayed, okay, they delayed the use of the 1 lakh rupees for 7-8 years. It's only in 1820s when the public instruction order has come, so then they have released some of the issues. But you know why they were doing it deliberately? They were doing it deliberately so that 1 lakh रुपए बच जाएंगे, ठीक है? If there would have been the profit of the company, more profit of the company, so company must have spent the money in education. But since their own profits were dwindling, so they just wanted to delay with some sort of other kind of discussions which are not relevant. So anyways, we'll not write this part कि पैसा नहीं रिलीज हुआ. We will write this part in the end when we are going to talk about the development of education. Then the other provision of this act, okay, that it clearly mentioned, this act of the 1813, that the intention of the British authority, you know what, they want to establish paramountcy in India. What is paramountcy? So British would be the supreme power in India, and then Indian powers will be subjugate. So one development I'll telling you, we'll not write here. Once again, we'll write after the freedom and partition. So what is this? That the Governor General who was appointed was Marquis of Hastings then, and he was given the power that he can conclude the treaties with the Indian rulers not on the basis of equality, but by claiming that British authority is paramount and supreme, and Indians are subordinate to the British authority. So this was actually given by this Charter Act of the 1813 only. Then apart from it, Christian missionaries, okay, they were allowed to go to India to promote the moral education and Christianity under a license. So first they had to take a license, and then after they can operate in India. So mention, you write. Pehla, first and second you have written. Then you write, company was further allowed to increase its dividend to 10.5%. To increase its dividend to 10.5%. 10.5%. Then next point. Company was further instructed to allocate 1 lakh rupees for the promotion of education in India. For the promotion of education of Indian subjects, likho. For the promotion of education of Indian subjects. Indian subjects. Full stop. Then next you write. This act declared that intention of British authority in India is to establish British as paramount power and Indian rulers will be subordinate. To British power. Done. Then further you write. Next point. Christian missionaries. Next point. Christian missionaries were allowed to promote to promote moral values and religious doctrines in India. Moral values and religious doctrines in India. एक लास्ट प्रोविजन है, ठीक है. सो दिस लास्ट प्रोविजन इज फ्रॉम हेयर ऑनवर्ड्स 1813 ऑनवर्ड्स द लोकल गवर्नमेंट्स ऑफ द कंपनी, ठीक है, they were allowed to impose the taxes on the local people. ठीक है. What do we understand by this last provision? The local governments of the British East India Company was allowed to impose the taxes as it deems fit. ठीक है, जैसा उसको उचित लगे. And on whom? The Indian subjects. So can you tell me that what is this particular local governments? बॉम्बे, मद्रास, ठीक है, एंड 1813 तक बहुत हो चुका है. ऑल्सो मैसूर इज ऑल्सो देयर विद देम, ठीक है. मराठा एरिया सम पार्ट, ठीक है, इज देयर विद देम. देन दे हैव द टेरिटरीज इन गुजरात, दे हैव द टेरिटरीज इन कर्नाटक, दे हैव टेरिटरीज इन हैदराबाद, ठीक है. सो नाउ these governments who would be there in these areas, so they can impose taxes कि जैसा उन्हें as they feel that it is a suitable tax, so then they can impose on the local people. So right, this act entitled British local governments, this act entitled British local government to impose taxes on the local subjects, whichever they deem fit. Taxes on local subjects whichever they deem fit, जैसा उन्हें उचित लगे, ठीक है. So this is what is all about the Charter Act of the 1813. So in this we don't need further analysis because this will serve as a background to the 1833. So 33 obviously we'll do tomorrow. As I mentioned to you that I'll leave you a little early. So kal 1833 and 53 we will be completing and we'll enter into the army, police, judiciary and civil services. ठीक है? Done? चलो, thank you.